The conversation around inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, or IDEA, has been happening for decades, but not many organizations have successfully championed it. Workplace diversity is improving at a snail's pace, despite pledges and attempts by corporations. Jefferson Darrell runs a boutique consultancy firm that works to connect marketing and communications with diversity and inclusion. Jefferson, you founded your own agency because you saw a lack of diversity in C-level executives. So how can we increase diversity in leadership positions?
To help increase diversity in leadership positions, companies need to take an honest and often a very difficult look inside of their own corporate cultures. They need to ensure that their culture works for all peoples, not just for the insiders or that dominant workplace culture.
Are organizations getting diversity and inclusion right?
A lot of times to get things right, companies, there are 5 things company needs, and often companies neglect this, which is why they're not getting it wrong. Number 1, data. They need to talk to the people and understand where some of these gaps may be. So you need to inform that solution versus jumping right to a solution or a conclusion. Number 2 is policy. Make it official. Number 3, accountability. A lot of times there's never a senior executive who's put in charge of this, of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Usually it's a woman, a racialized person, a queer person, who often is doing it by the side of their desk with zero support from the organization. Measurement, you need to understand where you are and benchmark that so you know how far you can move that dial. And then finally, investment in time and financial resources and human resources. So once again, the 5 things that a company needs to have a successful D&I organizational journey are data, policy, accountability, measurement, and investment.
What do you think the role of mentorship plays when looking to foster diversity and inclusion in a business?
Mentorship is huge. There's mentorship and there's sponsorship. And I think a lot of times people focus a little too much on the mentorship versus the sponsorship. A lot of people don't necessarily understand that difference. It's a bit nuanced. Frankly, I think mentorship goes both ways, as in a senior employee with a junior employee, understanding what their concerns are and what their challenges might be to move up that corporate ladder. But it also teaches the senior employee what's happening with junior folk now, what's happening with Gen Z right now, and how can we motivate Gen Z to contribute fully to the organization. And then when you layer in that component of sponsorship, and the biggest difference between mentorship and sponsorship means I am going to go to bat for you. I'm going to encourage you to apply for a role that might be more senior than where you currently are at. I'm going to coach you in terms of getting that role. I'm also going to speak to that hiring manager and either provide an endorsement for you or suggest you need to speak with this person. Here's why.
MindFrame Connect offers programs to help mentors and mentees accelerate within an organization. So what is some advice you would give to mentors to help ensure that they're on the right path when it comes to inclusion and diversity?
2 things I often state in the D&I space, diversity and inclusion space, are empathy and listening. And when I say listening, I mean actively listening. One thing I find as a society, and I'm speaking very generally here, is we listen, but we listen to respond versus actively listening to truly understand. And that's a key piece, I would say, for mentors and for anyone in the D&I space is empathy. Try to put yourself in that other person's shoes, try to lie on their shoes. And one of the only ways to achieve that empathy is by listening to them. And again, it sounds like it's an easy thing to do, but that's why I say actively listening to understand versus actively listening to counter or respond. And I find today's society, I'm speaking very generally, we often listen to respond versus I'm really trying to understand where you're coming from.
You conduct a lot of diversity and inclusion audits. What are some of the key takeaways you've learned?
So, number 1, we often don't know what we don't know. I can tell you right now, after the murder of George Floyd, Breakfast Culture received a number of requests for D&I audits around issues of race. One of our clients came, let's talk about issues of race. When we did the audit with them and actually talked to their people, what they were very surprised to see, the racial issue wasn't a surprise. What they were surprised to see is there was a large contingent of their employees who had hidden disabilities, and there were issues of accessibility in the organization. They were just, wow, we had no idea. The other piece that was eye-opening for them were there were issues of ageism. where the majority of their staff were much younger people, or Gen Z. And those two pieces of insight, in addition to any potential racial issues, those two pieces of insight were massive for them. They had no idea. And this is where I go back to that whole concept of, I find why people or a lot of organizations get it wrong is they make these assumptions, jump right to a solution. Let's do a talk, let's do an inclusion cafe, versus talking to your people to find out where the actual issues are.